Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take your curiosity and your shared resources, then plunge into them to unearth those surprising nuggets of knowledge and insight. Our mission today is to embark on a bit of a linguistic excavation, delving into the rich and, well, often surprising history of English words that start with the letter E.
Yeah, it's amazing what you find.
It really is. It's truly remarkable how much history, how many forgotten stories can be packed into something as seemingly simple as, the first letter of a word.
Indeed. Language isn't just a tool for everyday communication, is it? It's a dynamic, living archive.
Natalie.
Each word carries echoes of past beliefs, social structures, human ingenuity, preserving them in ways we rarely notice.
Right.
Today we're drawing extensively from the Oxford Dictionary of Word Histories to reveal how seemingly simple words can tell incredibly complex stories. It gives you a unique shortcut, really, to being truly well-informed about the subtle layers beneath our everyday vocabulary.
And we'll uncover some fascinating things, like how earwig got its wonderfully literal name, reveals an ancient folk belief, apparently.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. We'll trace how a word like ecstasy used to describe something akin to insanity, if you can believe it, before evolving into its modern sense of, rapturous joy.
A total flip.
And we'll explore how the simple act of entertaining an idea connects to literally holding something. Maybe in your hands, maybe just in your mind. Plus, we're going to dive deep into how those tiny prefixes, those fundamental building blocks like X and N, are true linguistic powerhouses. They shape so much of our vocabulary.
They really do. They're the hidden engines.
Get ready for some serious aha moments, because I think what you find truly fascinating here is how something as fundamental as a single letter or these little prefixes can actually hold so much linguistic power. All right, let's start our linguistic excavation. We'll begin with some words that feel utterly everyday, almost invisible in their familiarity.
Yeah, the ones you don't even think about.
Exactly. But they hide truly ancient secrets in their very fabric. These are words we use without a second thought, but their origins tell a surprising story about how our language first took shape.
Indeed, it's often those words we use without thinking, like each and every, that hold the most surprising clues, about how our language first came together.
Right.
They aren't mere modern synonyms. They carry historical nuances embedded in their very earliest form.
Exactly. So let's start right there. With each and every, we might often use them interchangeably, right?
We do.
But our source reveals they both have deep Germanic roots, stemming from Old English, and subtly distinct histories that persist to this day. Each comes from an Old English word, elk, which is interestingly related to words in other Germanic languages like the Dutch elk and the German jäglich. All of these, the dictionary tells us, trace back to a West Germanic phrase meaning ever alike.
Ever alike. Interesting. And every veal is even more transparent once you know its history. It's quite literally a compound word from Old English.
Oh, really?
Yeah, efrielke. It directly translates to ever each.
Ah, okay. So efre meaning ever.
Precisely. So you can clearly see the direct lineage there, how one word, each, built upon the concept of another, ever, to form something subtly new.
And what's truly remarkable is how that subtle distinction has persisted. From their earliest uses right up to today, our source points out that unlike every, each could always be used from the earliest times, in the context of just two items.
Just two, yeah.
As opposed to requiring several. Think about it. You might instinctively say, each of us will take a side, implying two people or two groups.
Right.
But when you say every person in the room raised their hand, you're almost certainly referring to a larger group, right? A more comprehensive one.
That's a fantastic point. The precise distinction between each person and every person isn't arbitrary at all. It's a linguistic inheritance. It's deeply rooted in their very formation. And it has been preserved through centuries of language evolution. It's a great example of how subtle variations in meaning, seemingly minor grammatical preferences, have been embedded in our vocabulary for a very, very long time.
So it speaks to the precision our linguistic ancestors were aiming for, even in what seem like simple words.
Absolutely. Even in simple quantifiers, it shows a desire for clarity.
Now let's move on to the ear, because this one is a classic case of linguistic coincidence. It's brilliant.
Yes, the two ears.
We have two distinct words that sound absolutely identical. You have ear, the organ of hearing, and ear, as in an ear of corn.
Yeah.
What's genuinely fascinating is that they have entirely separate etymological lineages.
Completely different paths.
Which just goes to show how sounds can converge over time even when meanings and origins are completely distinct. It's like two separate paths ending up at the exact same sonic destination.
Precisely. The organ of hearing, traces its roots way back to Old English air.
Air, okay.
And it's of Germanic origin. You can see its relatives in Dutch or and German or.
All right, you can hear the similarity.
You can. And this lineage extends even further back, which is incredible, to an ancient Indo-European root shared by Latin oris and Greek ubis.
Wow, Indo-European, that's ancient.
It really is. This incredibly ancient connection highlights the fundamental universal nature of hearing and human experience across diverse language families. It's a concept so core to our existence that it's woven into the very fabric of ancient language.
And we see this deep history reflected in phrases we still use today. Take the proverb, walls have ears, right?
Classic.
Speaks directly to the function of hearing. Or describing a person as a sympathetic ear.
Yeah, a common metaphor.
To characterize a type of listener. There's even a more modern, I think it was early 1970s U.S. expression, ear candy.
Ear candy, right. For pop music, maybe?
Yeah, pleasant but maybe shallow music, showing how the word adapted to describe a certain kind of musical discrimination. And then there's the phrase, within earshot, from the early 17th century, which was apparently influenced by the imagery of bowshot.
Like the range of an arrow. That makes sense.
Exactly. It's amazing how a physical distance from archery became a metaphor for auditory range.
Meanwhile, ear, referring to the seed-bearing head of a cereal plant like an ear of corn,
Right?
also hails from Old English error and is also Germanic origin, related to Dutch error and German error.
So, same sound, same Old English spelling even, but different roots, ultimately.
Well, different ultimate origins, even though the Old English forms look similar, the sheer coincidence that these two words, so different in meaning, sound exactly the same but have such separate roots, truly speaks to the sometimes arbitrary or, well, coincidental nature of language development.
It's what linguists call phonological convergence, is that right?
That's it. Without a semantic one same sound, totally different sense.
Speaking of the ear as an organ, isn't it curious how a tiny creature could get its name from an ancient belief about our very ears?
Ah, you're leading into the earwig.
I am. This one is just delightfully literal and a little creepy when you know its history.
Definitely creepy.
The creature is named earwig because in Old English, earwig literally meant earwig. Air for ear and wicca, which is probably related to our modern word wiggle.
Earwiggle. And the reason for this vivid, somewhat unsettling name, it was once a widespread folk belief that these insects would crawl into the human ear, hence the earwiggle or ear creature naming. What's truly remarkable is that this same vivid folk belief is found in synonyms in other languages too.
Oh, really? Like what?
For example, the French call it perceray, which literally translates to ear piercer.
Ear piercer. Even worse.
And in German, it's Ohrwurm.
Literally earworm.
Earworm. We use that differently now for catchy songs.
We do, but originally it was the insect, so it seems to be a cross-cultural ancient fear.
That's fascinating. So it suggests that even a tiny word like earwig can be a direct window into ancient folk beliefs and widespread anxieties, even if those beliefs were a little, well, squirmy. It's remarkably common, actually, when you look at how early languages developed. Naming often stemmed from direct observation, perceived threats, or even superstitions.
Makes sense.
The earwig example is particularly potent because it captures a tangible, if somewhat unfounded, fear. It underlines how language often reflects immediate, tangible experiences and common beliefs, even those that might seem superstitious to us now.
And speaking of common, tangible things, let's talk about earth. A fundamental word.
Absolutely.
This word, too, comes from Old English earth and is of Germanic origin, related to Dutch aard and German erd.
You can hear the connections again?
Yeah. In its early uses, it covered everything from the physical ground and soil beneath our feet
Right.
to the much grander concept of the world itself as a dwelling place for humanity.
Its applications expanded over time, moving from the purely geological to the more practical. For instance, its use as the burrow of an animal like a fox's earth or badger's earth. That dates from the late 16th century. This shows a practical, observational extension of the term beyond just the surface of the planet.
But here's where Earth truly takes on a poetic and deeply human dimension. One of the most recent and quite beautiful figurative extensions is the phrase, to feel the earth move.
Hemingway.
Exactly. To express intense ecstasy or profound, emotional, often romantic experience. Our source notes that the first recorded occurrence of this evocative phrase is in Ernest Hemingway's For Whom the Bell Tolls from 1940. A character famously asks, "Did thee feel the earth move?" And the response is, "Yes. As I died, put thy arm around me, please."
That's a powerful illustration, isn't it? It demonstrates how a concrete term for our planet and its very substance can morph into such a poetic and intimate expression for profound human experience,
Yeah.
showing language's incredible capacity for metaphorical expansion. It takes something vast and external, the planet itself, and internalizes it as a visceral, almost seismic personal sensation.
It's a testament to the human imagination, using the most fundamental elements of our world to describe our deepest feelings.
Truly.
From the literal ground we walk on and the creatures that maybe crawl into our ears. Let's shift. Let's look at words that have undergone remarkable transformations in their meaning. These often reflect significant shifts in human thought, social structures, and sometimes just a delightful touch of irony.
What's truly fascinating here is how words are never static. Their meanings can shift, sometimes radically, giving us a unique window into how societies, perceptions, and even philosophical ideas change over time. It's like linguistic archaeology of evolving concepts.
I love that linguistic archaeology. Okay, let's start with eager. When you think of eager today, you probably picture someone keen, enthusiastic, right? Maybe impatient for something good.
Yeah, eager to please, eager beaver.
Exactly. I'm eager to learn. She's eager for the weekend. But our source reveals its Middle English origins tell a very different story. Early senses included sharp to the senses, pungent, sour.
Sour, like vinegar.
Apparently, it actually comes from the Old French aigre, which meant keen, from the Latin acer or acre, meaning sharp, pungent, like the sharpness of vinegar, or maybe a sharp edge.
Huh. The evolution in meaning here is quite intriguing then. The sense of full of keen desire when describing somebody's attitude. That seems to be a distinctly English development.
Ah, so we did that ourselves.
It looks like it. Unlike other now obsolete senses, which came directly from its old French source. For example, Shakespeare used eager to mean biting or sharp-tongued, as in vex him with eager words in Henry VI, Part 3.
Wow, eager words, meaning sharp words. That's different.
It also described metals as brittle or imperfectly tempered, like eager gold, suggesting it was too sharp or hard to work with.
Okay.
And it even described a fierce countenance, as seen in Mallory's Mort d'Art with an ager countenance. Fierce.
Wow, so from literally biting or sour or brittle to metaphorically sharp in desire or enthusiasm. This word truly shows how a term for physical sharpness evolved to describe a mental state. That feels like a uniquely English innovation.
It is.
It's like the sharpness of a blade or a taste became the sharpness of a mind, or the intensity of a desire. What a clever metaphorical leap for a language to make.
It's a testament to how speakers of a language take existing concepts from the physical world and adapt them to new, more abstract psychological domains. It's a subtle but powerful example of semantic extension,
Right.
where the meaning stretches from one domain to another.
Next up, earnest. This word, meaning serious or sincere, comes from Old English earneste.
Earnest.
It's Germanic in origin and related to the German noun ernst, which also means seriousness. But here's the kicker, and this really stood out in the dictionary's history. The adjective earnest seems to have died out in Old English.
Disappeared for a while.
Yeah, and then remarkably developed afresh later in the language's history.
Mhm.
There are no clear examples found in Middle English texts.
That's unusual, yes, and that reemergence brought a subtle but significant shift in connotation. Early contexts of the revived word showed it to involve intense or even violent feeling.
Violent.
Yeah, which is often completely excluded in modern usage. Today, when we say someone is earnest, we usually mean sincere and serious, maybe even somewhat quiet and profound in their seriousness.
Right, not overwrought.
Rather than intensely or violently emotional. You wouldn't say someone was earnest if they were, screaming with passion.
That's a fascinating implication then. It suggests a cultural shift where earnestness moved from potentially volatile intensity, maybe even aggressive passion,
Right.
to a more subdued, perhaps more refined, and internally focused sincerity. It feels like it reflects a change in how strong emotions were perceived or valued in public expression.
It does. It's almost as if society collectively decided to tone down the word's intensity over time.
Or value a different kind of seriousness.
Precisely. It reveals a shift in what was considered appropriate or admirable in terms of emotional display, reflected directly in the word's evolution.
Now consider eccentric. Today, it describes someone who is unconventional, quirky, maybe delightfully odd.
Yeah, my eccentric aunt always wears mismatched socks, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But its original late Middle English use as a noun referred to something very different, a circle or orbit, which did not have the Earth precisely at its center.
Ah, astronomy.
Yes, this comes from the Greek ketros, literally meaning out of center.
So it began as a technical term from astronomy, describing a celestial deviation from the perceived norm of a geocentric universe. And then, surprisingly, the word's used in describing people as odd and whimsical,
Yeah, when did that happen?
as out of the ordinary or off-center in their behavior, arose in texts in the late 17th century. It took a conceptual leap from astronomical orbits to human personalities.
It's a brilliant conceptual jump, isn't it? From a literal displacement in space to a metaphorical displacement from societal norms, from astronomy to human personality. This word highlights a remarkable shift in how we describe deviations from the norm. It's the same core idea of out of center, but applied to vastly different spheres of existence.
It perfectly illustrates how abstract concepts, once applied to the physical world, can be extended to human character and behavior. Quite elegant, really.
Now, get ready for egregious. This one is truly a standout because it means the exact opposite of what it started out as.
Oh, this is a fun one. The complete flip.
Totally.
Yeah.
In the mid-16th century, egregious started out meaning remarkably good or outstanding.
Really good.
Yes. It comes from the Latin egregious, meaning illustrious, and literally meant standing out from the flock. You know, like an outstanding sheep, a truly exceptional one. E meaning out of, and greg meaning flock.
Standing out from the flock, in a good way. And here's the linguistic twist, one that almost makes you chuckle. The derogatory sense of outstandingly bad or shockingly terrible arose as an ironical use in the late 16th century.
Ah, sarcasm.
Exactly. Imagine someone back then utterly fed up with something truly awful, saying, oh, that's just an egregious piece of work, but with a roll of their eyes and a clear, sarcastic tone.
I can picture it.
That biting sarcasm was so effective, it literally flipped the word's meaning. The irony stuck, and the original positive sense faded away almost completely.
It's incredible, isn't it? Few words have so completely inverted their original meaning due to irony. It's like calling something wicked good, and it just becomes wicked, maybe, though that's more complex. But here, the positive sense just vanished.
Almost entirely. It makes egregious a truly standout example of linguistic inversion. It's a testament to the power of social context and human wit in shaping language.
A linguistic mic drop that endured for centuries.
It serves as a great reminder that irony, sarcasm, and playful subversion of meaning can permanently alter a word's trajectory, demonstrating language's dynamic and often unpredictable nature.
Next, ecstasy. In late Middle English, this word came from the Greek stasis, meaning standing outside oneself.
Nextasis.
The root elements are ek for the out and histai for to place. But what did standing outside oneself originally mean? And how did it evolve into our modern sense of overwhelming joy?
Well, the classical Greek senses of ecstasis actually included insanity and bewilderment.
Insanity.
So initially, ecstasy was a state of mental disarray, being literally out of your mind in a negative, perhaps even frightening way. This then developed to mean withdrawal of the soul from the body, a kind of spiritual trance.
Ah, more mystical.
And later in medical writers, trance in a more general sense. These varied senses of being outside oneself eventually blended into the modern languages, leading to our contemporary understanding of ecstasy as profound joy, spiritual rapture, or intense emotional elation.
So it captures this whole spectrum, from mental disarray and bewildering confusion to a spiritual trance and finally to an intense emotional high.
Exactly.
It's the same core concept of being out of oneself, but the evaluation and experience of that state completely changed over centuries. It's as if humanity decided to reclaim being outside oneself as a positive sought-after experience.
It's a truly fascinating journey, illustrating how a word can cover such a wide emotional and psychological range, moving from something potentially negative or pathological to something profoundly positive and even transcendent.
Yeah, it highlights how our understanding of inner states shifts over time.
Definitely.
Then there's emote. This is a relatively modern word, only appearing in the early 20th century as U.S. colloquial usage.
Fairly recent.
It's a back formation, meaning we took an existing noun, emotion, and created a new verb, emote, by essentially working backward, removing what felt like a suffix.
Like how editor gave us edit or television gave us televise.
Exactly, and its specific nuance is telling. It describes how an actor portrays feelings in a theatrical or exaggerated manner, often distinct from genuine feeling.
Right. You don't typically emote genuine sadness, you feel it. When someone emotes, it suggests a performance, perhaps even an over-the-top display, rather than an authentic expression.
It implies a certain artificiality, doesn't it?
It does. It's about the performance of feeling, often for an audience. This shows language's dynamism, creating new verbs from existing nouns to describe very specific, nuanced human behavior, especially in performance contexts.
It's almost a critical term, isn't it? A subtle jab at an actor who might be overacting.
It can certainly be used that way. It fills a very precise semantic gap, differentiating between experiencing an emotion and consciously, perhaps even performatively, displaying it. It speaks to how sophisticated our language can be in describing human behavior.
Let's move to entertain. This word, from late Middle English, comes from the French entretenir,
Entretenir.
which is based on the Latin intermeaning among and tenere meaning to hold. To literally to hold among or to hold together.
The original meaning was quite literal. Maintain or continue. You might entertain a correspondence with someone,
Right, keep it going.
meaning you maintained that exchange of letters. This then developed in the late 15th century to maintain in a certain condition or treat in a certain way. Shakespeare, for instance, writes in Henry VI, Part 1, I am sorry that with reverence I did not entertain thee as thou art, meaning he didn't treat them with due respect.
Okay, didn't hold them in the right regard.
Exactly. The meaning show hospitality, as in entertaining guests, also existed from the same period, literally, holding them within your home, maintaining them as guests.
And it was only in the early 17th century that the verb started to be used in the context of entertaining an idea.
That's right. Literally holding an idea in your mind, considering it, maintaining it there for thought.
And the noun entertainment for a public performance came even later.
A bit later, yes, from the early 18th century, referring to an activity that holds one's attention or maintains a pleasant state.
This is a beautiful example of semantic extension. From physically holding or maintaining a correspondence, to treating someone a certain way, to mentally considering an idea, and finally, to amusing an audience.
Yeah.
The core notion of holding or maintaining is still subtly present, but its application has become far more abstract and diversified.
It showcases how adaptable words can be, stretching to cover new conceptual ground.
And wrapping up this section, we have enthusiasm. This word burst onto the scene in the early 17th century from the Greek enthusiasmos.
Enthusiasm.
Its root, enthos, means possessed by a god or inspired. The second element actually comes from theos, meaning God.
Possessed by a god. So originally, enthusiasm referred very specifically to religious fervor or divine inspiration.
Wow.
An enthusiast was a person who believed themselves to be literally divinely inspired, reflecting the Greek enthusiastes, a person inspired by a god.
So it wasn't just keen interest back then.
Not at all. It was much more intense, potentially even suspect in some circles. The verb enthuse, on the other hand, is a more recent, early 19th century U.S. colloquial back formation from the noun.
Ah, another back formation.
Yes, often used with a slightly humorous or informal tone, as in, don't enthuse too much.
Right. This word really traces an incredible journey from sacred possession and literal divine inspiration to our modern secular excitement or keen interest.
It does.
It reflects a profound cultural shift away from literal divine influence and toward a more generalized sense of keen interest or passion. It's no longer about being filled with a god, but just filled with energy for something, whether it's a hobby or a cause.
It highlights how even words with deep spiritual origins can become completely secularized over time, adapting to changing societal worldviews and a more rationalistic, less superstitious understanding of human experience.
It's a linguistic record of humanity's changing relationship with the divine, almost.
A very neat summary of it, yes.
These word journeys are truly fascinating, showing us how meanings stretch and warp over centuries. But sometimes the real story isn't just in the meaning shifts, but in how words are built, piece by piece, using recurring linguistic elements.
Like prefixes and suffixes.
Exactly. So if we connect this to the bigger picture of word building, we can see how little pieces of language, like prefixes, act as powerful semantic engines. They add layers of meaning and direction, often in incredibly consistent ways, across a vast vocabulary.
Exactly. Our source highlights two particularly prolific prefixes for our E words, X and N. Understanding them unlocks the logic behind dozens, if not hundreds, of English words.
Right.
They are truly the unsung heroes of vocabulary expansion, acting like linguistic superglue that attaches specific directional or intensity concepts to root words.
Let's start with the prefix X, which comes from the Latin ex meaning out of or from. This seemingly simple prefix actually carries a surprising number of distinct yet related senses. That's why it's so versatile and appears in so many words. It's a linguistic chameleon.
Yes, it's truly a powerhouse. Its most fundamental meaning is out, signifying movement away from something or being outside. Think of exclude, which means literally to shut out something or someone.
Shut out. Okay.
Or exit, which is simply to go out. You can also see it in eradicate.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Exactly. Comes from Latin roots, meaning to pull up by the roots, thus literally taking something out of the ground completely. And eject, to throw out. In all these cases, X signifies movement away or outside a boundary.
Okay, that makes sense. Out.
And then X also conveys an upward movement, almost like out and up.
Out and up, like.
Take exalt, which means to raise aloft or lift up. Or elevate, which comes from a Latin root lebus, meaning light. So elevate literally means to make light and thus raise.
Liveth like levitate.
Precisely. It's not just out, but out and upwards, like an ascending motion.
Interesting. Okay, what else can X do?
It can also mean thoroughly, indicating completion or intensity of an action.
Thoroughly. How does that work?
For example, exaggerate comes from a Latin verb meaning to heap up.
Yeah.
So to exaggerate is to heap up thoroughly, to overstate completely.
Okay. To go all out and heaping up.
Right. Exhaust means to drain out entirely, leaving nothing behind. And exhort means to encourage thoroughly or earnestly, to truly press someone to do something. The X here emphasizes the comprehensiveness or the full extent of the action.
That's a great nuance, adding a sense of completion. And then there's removal or release. That seems pretty common too.
Yes, this is where you get words like excommunicate, to exclude from the faithful community. Excuse, which means to free from blame or obligation.
Free from.
Exempt, to take out or free someone from a duty. Or exonerate, to free from a burden or accusation. In all these cases, X conveys a separation or a freeing from something.
Right, taking out of blame, out of obligation.
Exactly. And X can also express the inducement of a state, meaning causing a particular condition to come about.
Causing something.
Like, consider exacerbate, which literally means to make harsh or bitter. It causes a bad situation to become worse.
Makes it harsher, right.
Or exhilarate, which means to make cheerful or lively. The prefix indicates causing a particular state or condition to manifest.
Fascinating how it can do all that. And finally, a very common modern usage, X can denote a former state, as in ex-husband or ex-president.
Yeah, that's everywhere now.
While our source doesn't list many specific examples of this from the dictionary itself, the principle is clearly established and extremely common in modern English, marking someone who was something, but is no longer.
This single Latin prefix, X, demonstrates how Latin has equipped English with incredibly precise and versatile ways to describe actions involving outward movement, completion, or a change of state. It's like a semantic Swiss Army knife.
Good analogy.
Providing a powerful toolkit for expressing complex ideas efficiently.
But wait, there's another X. You mentioned this earlier. We also have the prefix X from Greek X.
That's right.
Which also means out of or outside. While it sounds the same and has a related meaning to its Latin counterpart, it tends to primarily carry this sense of out or outside in maybe a more spatial or foundational way. Is that fair?
That's a good way to put it, yes. And it's important to differentiate these influences. Think of eccentric again, which we discussed earlier, meaning out of center.
Right, from the Greek ekentros.
Or eclipse, which comes from a Greek verb meaning to fail to appear, or forsake its accustomed place. Literally, the sun or moon stepping out of its expected position.
Okay.
And ecstasy, standing outside oneself. Or exodus, literally a going out or mass departure.
So this highlights the dual influence of Latin and Greek on English vocabulary, sometimes with similar sounding prefixes carrying related but subtly distinct nuances. It's a rich tapestry of origins, and knowing this helps us understand why certain words were formed the way they were.
Absolutely. Now let's turn our attention to the prefix on. This one primarily comes into English from French, originating from the Latin in.
In becoming on.
Okay. This one also has a broad range of meanings, often signifying inclusion or causation, putting things in or making them become something.
Right. It can add the sense of put into or into, like enroll.
Exactly. Anroll originally meant to literally write names on a roll of parchment, putting a name into a list. Or ensconce, meaning to shelter within a fortification, and later to settle comfortably putting oneself in a secure place.
Ensconce.
With entomb, to put in a tomb. Or envelop, to put in a wrapper. It's consistently about placing something inside or within a container or condition.
Okay, makes sense.
In. It can also indicate brought into the condition of. A great example here is enfranchise,
Right, giving the vote.
which means to make free or to give someone the right to vote. The prefix signifies a change into a particular state or status, the state of being free or having the franchise.
Okay, and encarrant can also act as an intensifier,
Right.
giving more force or emphasis to a verb.
Yes, exactly. Think of enliven, to give life to make more lively.
Right.
Enrich, to make wealthy, to make more rich. Or enrage, to make furious, to bring someone into a state of intense anger. It heightens the action or the resulting state.
It adds energy to the word.
It does. Our source also notes that M is a common variant spelling of M,
Why does that happen?
which occurs when N is assimilated before root words starting with B or P sounds. It's just for ease of pronunciation.
Makes sense. It's easier to say emblazon than emblazon.
Exactly. So you see emblazon or emplacement instead of emblazon or emplacement. It's a phonetic adaptation that makes the words flow better.
And just like with eggs, there's also an N from Greek.
Yes, there is. This one typically adds the specific sense of within or in an internal way, often related to concepts that originate from an inner state or action.
Within, okay, like.
This Greek N is seen in words like empathy.
Empathy again.
Yes, assimilated here too. It means literally in feeling, the ability to feel within oneself what another is experiencing.
Right.
Enthusiasm, which we discussed earlier, originally meant possessed by a god or inspired from within. And energy, which literally means in work and inner capacity for activity or power. It consistently denotes an internal quality, process, or force.
These prefixes are like linguistic Lego blocks, aren't they?
That's a perfect analogy.
They allow for complex meanings to be built from simple directional or intensity concepts, fundamentally shaping our vocabulary and how we express everything from physical actions to abstract states of mind or being.
They're a testament to the efficient, systematic nature of language building across different linguistic origins. Powerful evidence of how systematic language construction can be, even drawing from diverse linguistic origins like Latin and Greek.
It's a foundational insight into how English manages to be so rich and expressive.
Absolutely.
Now, let's transition from the structural side of words to how they become time capsules. Here's where it really gets fascinating, showing how language isn't just shaped by us, but it also reflects who we are, what we've believed, and what we've been through as societies.
Yeah, the history packed inside.
These words aren't just about linguistic shifts. They're about specific moments in history and culture, preserving them for us to discover.
Yes, many words are intrinsically linked to historical events, societal structures, mythology, and even political movements, revealing their past significance in ways that are often surprising. They're like miniature museums of human experience.
I love that. Okay, let's kick this off with edict. This word comes from the Latin edictum, meaning something proclaimed.
Proclaimed, right.
Essentially an official proclamation or decree issued by an authority. We still use it in that sense today. For example, the king issued an edict.
Its historical significance is particularly notable in the phrase Edict of Nantes.
Yes, France.
Signed in 1598 by King Henry I of France, this landmark edict was a royal decree that granted substantial rights to the Calvinist Protestants, known as Huguenots, in a largely Catholic nation. It effectively ended the brutal French wars of religion for a time.
A huge deal, but it didn't last, did it?
No, tragically. Its revocation by King Louis XIV in 1685 led to the mass emigration of hundreds of thousands of Huguenots, impacting not only France, but other European nations where they sought refuge. A massive brain drain and human tragedy.
So, the word itself is a direct historical marker for periods of both religious tolerance and intense persecution. It encapsulates a major, often tragic chapter in European history. The very word edict carries the weight of those societal shifts and the profound impact of state power on individual lives.
Indeed, demonstrating how legal and political terms are often deeply embedded in specific historical narratives, embodying the shifts in power and ideology that shaped nations.
Moving on to earl. This word eorl in Old English is of Germanic origin.
Eorl.
They originally denoted a man of noble rank in stark contrast to a churl or peasant.
Right, the social hierarchy.
Specifically, it was a hereditary nobleman directly above the rank of thane, who held land granted directly by the king. It paints a picture of early Anglo-Saxon social structure.
Its meaning evolved significantly over time, mirroring shifts in governance and foreign influence. It later became equivalent to the Norse jarl.
The Viking connection.
Yes, a powerful chieftain or ruler. And under King Canute and his successors, the Danish kings who ruled England, the title Earl was applied to specific regional rulers overseeing vast territories.
So it became a bigger deal under the Danes.
It did. Then, in the late Old English period, as the Saxon court came increasingly under Norman influence leading up to the Norman conquest.
Right, 1066 and all that.
The word earl was eventually applied to any nobleman bearing the continental title of count. It sort of merged with the Norman system.
So the word earl itself mirrors the complex evolution of feudal titles and the profound impact of successive invasions and cultural exchanges, Danish, then Norman, on English society and its language. It's a direct linguistic trace of shifting power structures, foreign influences, and the gradual shaping of the English aristocracy. It's more than a title. It's a living history lesson in itself.
And it exemplifies how titles, which seem static and unchanging, can transform in meaning and application alongside the political and social landscapes they describe, absorbing centuries of history into their very definition.
Now for elf. This enchanting word, elf, in Old English, is Germanic in origin, and, interestingly, related to the German word Alp.
Alp, as in nightmare.
Exactly, which means nightmare. That's quite a hint to their original, often darker nature, isn't it? Not quite the cheerful beings of modern Christmas tales.
No, definitely not. Early belief, particularly in Germanic folklore, was that these dwarfish supernatural beings, often quite sinister, possessed great magical powers.
Sinister?
Oh, yes. They were thought to cause nightmares, hence the connection to Alp, substitute changelings for stolen human children.
Oh, the changeling myth.
And even produce diseases. The Germanic belief in elves is probably the principal source of the medieval superstition regarding fairies, pixies, and other mischievous or sometimes malevolent supernatural beings.
Wow. And there's a fascinating linguistic quirk revealed by our source, too, about gender.
Yes, originally elf was grammatically masculine and elven was feminine.
Okay, that makes sense.
But by the 13th and 14th centuries, the two forms seem to have been used interchangeably for both sexes, losing that grammatical gender distinction.
Huh. That's unusual for it to just dissolve like that.
It is rather unusual. This word provides a truly fascinating window into ancient folklore, its evolving perceptions from dark, dangerous entities to more whimsical ones.
You're right, like Tolkien's elves versus the older ones.
Exactly. And its enduring presence in our vocabulary. It reminds us of the magical and sometimes terrifying beliefs of our ancestors and how those beliefs literally shaped the words we still use, even if the meaning has softened considerably over time.
From mythical beings to vast empires, let's look at empire and emperor. These words, both Middle English, trace back to Latin.
Latin again, big influence.
Empire comes from imperium, meaning to command or supreme authority, and emperor from imperator, a military commander or one who holds supreme command.
Imperator.
Interestingly, the Latin verb imperare originally contained a sense of making preparations for an event with roots in towards and parere, prepare.
Preparing to command. Makes sense.
It hints at the meticulous organization required to command, doesn't it?
It does. Emperor initially referred specifically to the head of the Roman Empire, capturing that centralized, vast power of a single supreme ruler.
The quintessential emperor.
Exactly. However, it later gained a more general sense of sovereignty and was applied to rulers of wide territories, extending beyond those typically defined as a kingdom. A prominent example is Queen Victoria, assuming the title of Empress of India in 1876.
Right, the British Empire.
Signifying a massive expansion of British dominion and establishing a direct link to the Roman concept of imperial authority, though obviously in a very different historical context.
So the words themselves trace the historical trajectory of vast political power, conquest, and the evolution of governance, from ancient Rome to European colonialism. They are linguistic monuments to imperial ambition and the enduring human desire for broad control and influence. It's incredible how the same words can describe such disparate historical realities, yet retain that core meaning of supreme command.
Indeed. They underscore how words can encapsulate entire political systems and historical epochs within their etymology, serving as powerful symbols of dominion and organized power across millennia.
And what about English itself, our language's own name? In Old English, English already denoted the early Germanic settlers of 5th century Britain, the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes.
A whole group.
Or their language, not just the Angles. This tells us that even back then there was an understanding of a unified group and a common tongue, more or less.
The word underwent significant historical evolution, reflecting the complex and often turbulent history of the British Isles. By the 11th century, English came to be applied to all natives of England, including the Celtic and Scandinavian elements of the population who had settled there.
So it broadened to include everyone living there.
For a time. However, after the Norman conquest in 1066, a profound shift occurred. The descendants of the Norman invaders were regarded as French speakers and part of a French-speaking ruling class.
Right. The aristocracy spoke French.
And English was then largely restricted to people who were settled in England prior to the conquest, the subjugated populace, the common folk.
That's truly insightful. This word, English, is a living linguistic mirror, reflecting the shifting identities, conquests, and power dynamics of Britain's history. The layers of invasion, assimilation, and social stratification that shape the nation itself. It's more than just a name for a language. It's a condensed social and political history of a people. It speaks volumes about who was considered in and who was out at different points in time.
It demonstrates how terms of language and nationality can carry the weight of national identity and historical conflict, evolving as societies themselves are reshaped by migration and conquest.
Now for enigma. This word came into English in the mid-16th century from the Greek enigma, meaning riddle. Originally, it referred to a short piece of obscure prose or verse, intentionally described in obscure metaphors to puzzle the reader, a literary device.
And as we know, it later and currently refers to something puzzling or mysterious, often something difficult to understand or explain.
Right. Its illustrative content in modern history is quite famous, though.
The code machine.
Exactly. Enigma was the name given to the sophisticated German code machine broken by the Allies at Bletchley Park during World War II. Cracking the Enigma code was a crucial intelligence target that fundamentally changed the course of the war.
A massive turning point. Saved countless lives and shortened the conflict significantly.
It's also famously used descriptively for the enigmatic smile of Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa.
Ah, yes. The ultimate riddle in art.
Used precisely to convey a sense of mystery, unknowability, and a subtle challenge to interpretation. The painting itself becomes a riddle.
So Enigma traces a path from a literary device meant to puzzle to a crucial World War II intelligence target, and then an iconic art description. It consistently embodies mystery, the unknown, or the difficult to comprehend.
Shows remarkable consistency in its core meaning of riddle across vastly different contexts.
It does.
Let's delve into episcopal. This word, appearing in late Middle English, comes from the Greek episkopos.
Episkopos, meaning?
Overseer. This same Greek root also gave us the word bishop.
Ah, okay. Bishop is an overseer? Makes sense.
So episcopal literally means of a bishop, or governed by bishops. It's deeply embedded in the history and structure of the Christian church, as seen in denominations like the Methodist Episcopal Church and the Reformed Episcopal Church.
Right, the names reflect the governance structure.
Exactly. They explicitly reflect the principle of episcopacy, a system of church governance by bishops. It directly connects our modern religious vocabulary to ancient Greek organizational concepts within early Christianity.
It's a clear linguistic marker of a specific ecclesiastical hierarchy and tradition, linking the modern term directly to ancient Greek organizational concepts. A powerful example of how specialized vocabulary preserves the structure and history of institutions.
Indeed. It's a word that carries centuries of theological and organizational history within its structure, demonstrating the enduring influence of classical Greek on religious terminology. And finally, for this section, estate. In Middle English, estate originally meant simply state or condition.
Just state. Okay.
This sense remains in phrases like the holy estate of matrimony, signifying a married condition or status.
Right. The notion of condition then extended naturally to worldly property and possessions, particularly large tracts of land, which is where we get terms like country estate or winding up an estate after someone's passing. Your condition includes your property.
Makes sense. But even more historically significant, the word estate was used to define the three basic social and political divisions in pre-modern European societies.
The three estates.
Yes, the clergy, the first estate, the barons and knights, the second estate, and the commons, the third estate, representing the ordinary people.
Right. And the third estate was the commons, the ordinary people, who famously rose in influence during the French Revolution.
Exactly. And then the fourth estate became a powerful, often humorous way of referring to the press.
Highlighting its growing power and influence as a societal force alongside those traditional divisions. It became a check on power, much like the original estates were supposed to be, in theory.
Precisely. The word estate, therefore, provides a fascinating lens into historical social hierarchies and the evolving power structures of society. It reveals how political and social stratification became embedded in our language and how new influential groups claimed their own estate in the public imagination.
These words clearly demonstrate that language is never static. It's constantly adapting, showing the interplay between words and the historical, social, and cultural contexts they inhabit.
Yeah. Now let's transition to some words that offer even more quirky insights into language's present and future, highlighting unique phonetic developments, interesting collisions of meaning, and recent linguistic innovations driven by culture and technology. It's where language gets playful and responsive to our ever-changing world.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it shows us that language is always adapting, creating new words to describe new realities and even playfully distorting or repurposing old ones.
Right.
It's a living, breathing entity, constantly reflecting human ingenuity and our changing environment.
First up, easy peasy. This delightful phrase popped up when the 70s.
From the 1970s, yeah. It's a reduplication.
Reduplication.
A linguistic term for forming a new word by repeating or almost repeating an existing one, like hocus pocus or willy-nilly. Here, it's a reduplication of easy.
Meaning childishly easy.
Exactly. It's a great example of how informal language innovates for emphasis. The playful, childish word intensifies the sense, making something not just easy, but really easy, almost to the point of triviality.
Is the kind of playful language that often enters the lexicon from childhood or informal speech
Yeah.
and then becomes widely accepted, like okie dokie.
Precisely.
And speaking of new words for common concepts, eatery. This is a relatively recent word for a restaurant.
Yeah, American originally, I think, early 20th century.
Before that, you might have gone to a restaurant or a diner, but eatery feels almost more casual, doesn't it? Like a small, no-frills place.
It can, yeah. It simply demonstrates that even for concepts as basic and established as a place to eat, new words continue to emerge and find their place in common parlance.
Keeps the language fresh.
Often these are driven by regional preferences or informal usage initially before gaining wider acceptance. It's a testament to the ongoing inventiveness of everyday speakers.
Now, here's a truly surprising one that almost makes you smile at its literal origins. Eavesdrop.
Ah, the dripping water.
Exactly. Today, it means to secretly listen to a private conversation.
Yeah.
But its origin is much more literal and rooted in a specific physical act. It's an early 17th century back formation from eavesdropper.
And eavesdropper itself dates back even further to late Middle English.
Right.
And that eavesdropper came from the obsolete noun eavesdrop, which was literally the ground onto which water drips from the eaves of a house.
So the water dripping off the roof.
Yeah.
That space was the eavesdrop.
Exactly. So the act of listening in secretly derives directly from the physical location of someone standing under the eaves of a house where the water drips to overhear conversations from inside. They were literally standing in the eavesdrop area.
That's a phenomenal example of how the word is rooted in a very literal physical context that most people don't associate with it today.
Yeah.
You imagine a spy with sophisticated electronic equipment?
Right. Not someone getting wet.
Not someone literally standing in the drip line of a roof trying to catch snippets of conversation. It perfectly highlights how our modern abstract language often has incredibly concrete, even quaint origins.
It's a delightful historical insight into the tangible origins of seemingly abstract actions, reminding us that even our most complex vocabulary often began with simple, observable realities.
Next, another homophone pair. Egg, the food, and egg is into egg on.
Right, two completely different eggs.
These are two completely distinct words that just happen to sound identical, leading to historical confusion. Egg, the food, comes from Old Norse.
From the Vikings again.
And actually superseded the earlier Old English word a. So if you're speaking Old English, you wouldn't have said egg for your breakfast. You'd have had an I.
This linguistic shift caused some confusion even centuries ago, illustrating the messy reality of language change. Our source quotes William Caxton,
The printer.
the great English printer, in 1490, lamenting, "What shall the man in these days now write? Eggs or Aaron? Certainly it is hard to please every man."
Huh. Eggs or Aaron. He was literally grappling with which word to use for eggs in his printed texts because both were in use and caused confusion for his readers.
Imagine the editorial dilemma. It's relatable even today with regional dialect differences or spelling reforms.
Totally. Meanwhile, egg, the verb meaning urge or incite, as in egg on.
Nothing to do with breakfast?
No. Comes from Old Norse egga, which literally means to incite or perhaps even to sharpen or put an edge on something.
Why, related to edge?
Possibly distantly. And from that, we get the colloquial word eggy, meaning irritated or touchy.
Right, getting eggy about something?
That dates from the 1930s, from the notion of being urged on or incited to anger very easily.
And then we have egghead for a knowledgeable or academic person. Where does that fit?
Well, that's apparently an analogy with a bald head, which was sometimes associated with wisdom and intellect.
Ah, okay. Nothing to do with the other two eggs.
Nope. So we have two distinct words, egg the food and egg the verb, sounding identical, creating historical confusion like Caxton's, and then egghead branching off metaphorically, and slang like eggy developing, all from different roots or analogies.
It's a perfect example of linguistic collision and subsequent divergence. Language can be messy.
Let's move firmly into the digital age with emoticon. This word is a very clear product of the 1990s, right?
Absolutely. A blend of emotion and icon.
It's a beautiful example of how new technologies directly create new words.
This coinage emerged as part of the explosion of new words and technology, specifically describing any of the keyboard-generated facial expressions like a smiley face or a frown.
Yeah, you had to turn your head sideways to see them originally.
Exactly. Seen at the end of email communications back then. It was a direct and incredibly clever response to the need to convey nonverbal cues and emotional tone in text-based communication, something that was entirely new with digital messaging.
It's a perfect example of how digital communication rapidly shapes and expands our vocabulary, reflecting new ways of interacting and expressing ourselves that just didn't exist before the internet. We needed a word for those little keyboard faces, and emoticon filled the gap perfectly.
And similarly, Ethernet, coined in the 1970s, is a blend of ether and network.
Ether and network, okay.
This is a particularly interesting blend because of the historical baggage carried by the word ether itself.
Right, because ether itself has such a rich scientific history. In late Middle English, ether denoted a substance believed to occupy space beyond the sphere of the moon, part of ancient cosmology.
The fifth element, almost.
Yeah. Then, in the mid-17th century, it became a term for a rarefied, invisible substance formerly believed to permeate all space, acting as the medium for the transmission of light and other forces. This was a significant scientific concept for centuries, theorizing an invisible medium for transmission.
The luminiferous ether, which turned out not to exist, but it was a huge idea. So the naming of Ethernet for a computer networking technology which relies on invisible electrical signals or light pulses transmitting data through a network of cables or wirelessly suggests a conscious, intelligent nod to that concept of an invisible, ubiquitous medium for the transmission of information.
That's clever.
It echoes past scientific theories in modern technology, implying omnipresence and seamless connection through an unseen force. What a truly clever and subtle connection, from celestial theories to digital networks.
Absolutely brilliant. And finally, let's look at escalator and its verb form, escalate. Escalator was originally an early 20th century U.S. trade name.
A brand name like Kleenex or Hoover.
It's exactly. For a moving staircase, formed from the French word escalade, which literally meant to climb a wall by ladder, or a scaling ladder.
So it was quite literally about climbing. And the verb escalate is a back formation from escalator.
Another one.
Yes, arising in the 1920s, initially meaning, quite simply, to travel on an escalator, to go up on one.
Okay, I'm going to escalate to the next floor.
You could have said that, but here's where the semantic journey gets really interesting and takes a dramatic turn.
Yeah, because we don't use it like that now.
Not really. Its modern senses, like increase rapidly, usually with reference to prices or intensity, or become or make more serious, as in escalate the war.
Right, that's the common meaning.
Became particularly popular and widespread around the time of the Vietnam War in the late 1960s and early 1970s. This marked a significant broadening of its meaning from a purely physical act of climbing to a metaphorical increase or intensification, especially in geopolitical or conflict contexts. It became a word associated with rising tension and danger.
Wow, that's a huge shift.
Right.
From going upstairs to intensifying conflict.
This is a truly fascinating journey from a specific climbing mechanism to a general term for intensification, particularly in weighty geopolitical situations. It shows how a word can gain immense figurative power and currency through association with major world events and widespread anxieties.
It's an excellent demonstration of how societal anxieties and changes can be reflected in and even shape the evolution of language.
Absolutely.
And finally, let's explore error and its relatives. Errant, erratic, and error. All these words stem from the Latin errare,
Errare.
meaning profoundly to stray or to wander. It's amazing how this one core concept branched out.
This shared root of wandering is absolutely key to understanding this family of words. Errant was first used to mean traveling in search of adventure, as in a knight errant.
Right, a wandering knight.
A knight who literally wanders the land in search of noble deeds. Not necessarily doing anything wrong, just roaming. Its current sense of straying from accepted standards or deviating is a direct extension of that wandering, but now with a negative moral or intellectual connotation. Wandering off the correct path.
Okay. And erratic, also wandering.
Yes. Originally referred to planets, which were once described as erratic stars because of their wandering, unpredictable paths in the night sky, defying simple, fixed patterns.
Ah, the planets wander against the fixed star.
Exactly. The sense of unpredictable in movement or behavior dates from the mid-19th century, applying that celestial wandering to human behavior. So it's about wandering from an expected or regular path.
And errant. Like errant nonsense. Is that what
It is. Errant is a Middle English variant spelling of errant, originally used for a roving thief or vagabond, someone wandering with bad intent. Now, it's commonly heard in phrases like errant nonsense, signifying something thoroughly, completely, and perhaps errantly nonsensical or outrageous. It's a form of extreme deviation from sense. It intensifies the straying.
And error itself. A mistake.
Primarily meaning a mistake or fault today, yes. But it still retains its original sense of wandering in poetic use. Our source cites Tennyson's Gareth and Lynette, where he writes, "The damsel's headlong error through the wood."
Her error through the wood.
She's literally wandering astray, physically lost, rather than making a cognitive mistake in that line.
Wow. That's beautiful. This family of words perfectly illustrates how the literal idea of wandering extended to moral, intellectual, and even astronomical deviation, creating nuanced meanings for mistake or straying from the norm. It shows how deeply a core, simple concept can be reinterpreted and applied in various domains, leading to rich and varied vocabulary.
These words are a testament to language's incredible flexibility and its power of metaphor. Hashtag outro.
What an incredible journey through the ease words. From the ancient Germanic roots of each and earth, showing how fundamental distinctions and even poetic expressions are centuries old.
Yeah, really deep roots.
To the dramatic shifting meanings of eager and ecstasy, revealing profound cultural shifts in how we view internal states. And then we saw the powerful impact of prefixes like X and N.
Those linguistic engines.
Exactly. Acting as linguistic engines, crafting nuanced meanings from simple directional concepts.
And we've seen how edict encapsulates pivotal political history, how elf reveals ancient folklore and superstition, even nightmares.
Right.
And how the social structures reflected in words like estate continue to echo in modern terms like the fourth state. Every single word in our vocabulary is a tiny time capsule,
That's such a great way to put it.
holding stories, beliefs, and transformations within its sounds and letters. They are literally packed with history and cultural meaning, waiting for us to unlock them.
So what does this all mean for you listening in? Well, it means that language isn't just a tool for everyday communication. It's a dynamic, living archive. The next time you use a common word, or perhaps stumble upon one you rarely encounter, consider its hidden layers, its unexpected twists and turns, and the long, fascinating journey it took to get to your lips.
You're not just speaking, you're echoing centuries of human experience, human thought, human history.
Exactly.
This raises an important question, perhaps. What other seemingly simple words, maybe even the ones you use most frequently, might hide a similarly rich and surprising history, just waiting for you to unearth their secrets?
Something to ponder. What word will you look up next?
Could be anything.
Until next time, keep diving deep.